Hi, I'm Remy Perry. I represent caregivers on the board of the Brain Injury Association of York Region. It's been 10 years since the car accident that ended my wife's career with a brain injury and changed both of our lives forever. In the past decade, we've benefited from amazing advances in brain injury research, but it hasn't only been there that progress has been made. Assistive technology has come a long way towards helping caregivers like me do our job in helping our survivors. Today, we're going to talk little about some of those changes. I'm joined by Rick Hadleycrane. He is the director of the Business Development and Technology Program at Lawler Therapy. Welcome, Rick, and thanks for talking to me.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited to join you today.
When I think about assistive tech, I think of a lot of different things. I see a lot of things coming down the pipe through the news and that type of thing. When people think about assistive tech, families think about that, families of brain injury survivors, what do they imagine when they talk to you?
Well, when caregivers hear about assistive technology, I think the first thing comes to mind is complicated, highly specialized devices, maybe something clinical, hard to learn, often out of reach. Where in reality, assistive technology is usually much simpler, more familiar. It's often like the daily technology people already own, their phones, their tablets, smart speakers. It's used, though, in a very intentional way to support with memory, organization, communication, and routines. A lot of times just using the accessibility features, say they're built into your phone, which is extremely helpful. In order to access that, just go into the settings, there's accessibility features there, and there's a lot of options to help with like vision, hearing, sorry, and physical impairments. And I find once families understand that assistive technology is about adapting tools to the brain injury and not introducing something entirely new, becomes much less intimidating and becomes far more effective.
So you start with what they know and then you work from there.
A lot of us are already using every day on our devices. There's so many things on there that you can use as an assistive aid. So they're very smart. Apple and Android devices, they try to load your phone with things that are going to make your life easier.
And do you find that they're all really good changes that the type of tech that Apple and Android, Samsung, whoever else puts on their phones, and or are you find their use? Are there some changes that are have limited use?
Yeah, it depends. Well, I always recommend whatever somebody was used to using, try not to switch. So if you were, before your injury, if you were an Apple user, try to stick with that and not switch over to Samsung because it's familiar, but there are features that are between them that Samsung, like Android users, there are features on that phone that an Apple doesn't have. So I have a preference for using an iPhone. I just find that the accessibility features that are on there. They're just very helpful and it's just integrated. And so, yeah, there's also, you can go to, if you Google anything and go to their website, they have a list of all the accessibility features and how to activate them and how they will help in each area.
If you had to pick one particular feature, well, start with talking about Apple. Which one do you find works really well with brain injury survivors?
Just a lot of voice to text features more like that. And so that way it helps with a lot of the cognitive fatigue that goes on. So if somebody is using their phone a lot and then they have to type out what they're saying, so just using a simple feature as dictating what they're saying, it will type out everything, just make it a lot easier.
And who do you work with when you're working on you're introducing these? Are you working with the caregivers, with the OTs, with the survivors themselves as a team? How does that work?
Most times I'm working with a client, so if I'm going to show them how to use the features, it's going to make their life a lot easier. But I'm going to incorporate the caregiver as well because they're the ones that are going to be seeing them every day and helping them to use these devices. So it's important for me to show them this is what they're using, and then they can help reiterate how to do that because repetition is going to help somebody remember because we know that memory is often a huge issue. So if
Mhm.
somebody has that practice, then that's important. And then the whole rehab team, if there's an occupational therapist involved, we want everybody using the same kind of devices. But sometimes I even work with occupational therapists and say in their own practice, and it'll be like, this will be helpful for you staying organized and help make
Oh,
your
okay.
energy conservation, or even a caregiver
Sure.
on their own personal stuff. So you can take that all reverse it. Everything I show somebody who's one of my clients, that there are things I use myself in every day just to make life easier for me.
And that would extend to caregivers too, because if caregivers are not stressed Because I can tell you as a caregiver trying to keep track of, for example, records, dealing with insurance companies, keeping a timeline, that type of thing. It has been a real challenge over the past 10 years. And it's amazing how stressful that can be and how much technology can help there. So I guess working with caregivers as well as OTs helps out the survivor in the end anyway.
Oh, definitely. Anything you can do. Like a lot of times I'll have a caregiver and the survivor, they still need that support. So a lot of times there'll be shared things, like even just a to-do list that you might have for a client. It would be shared with the caregiver. So the client can add items. So it shows up on their device and then on each person's device. So they're working together using the same kind of programs.
Do you find that people are really surprised at this technology that already exists, maybe on their phones out there? Do you get a lot of, is it easier? Do you have some resistance with others in terms of that tech learning curve that a lot of us, especially older caregivers, face?
Definitely a lot of people are resistant to it, especially with smart speakers. I find a lot of the older people, they think that it's listening in on them, but it's there to help. I could think of a client just with a smart speaker that they had them and they didn't realize that it could help. They mentioned one of the biggest frustrations, his wife was talking about her husband who had the injury, and she said that we're always running out of certain groceries and he's never telling me when we run out of things. And so they started using their smart speaker to the client did, both of them actually. Whenever they run out of something, say if it was milk or eggs, the client's wife would just say to Google, add eggs to the grocery list, or it's just all done verbally. And then so the client got it, started doing that, and then just it became so much easier for the wife because she said she always knows what he needs now when he runs out of something.
Do you
So.
find that sometimes that is a little bit more difficult for the survivor because a lot of brain injury survivors do have expressive language difficulties. And I see that with my wife trying to form perfect sentences in time for the Amazon device, which I will not name right now because it's probably listening in. She wants it to play a certain playlist or she wants to ask about whatever. And in composing the sentence, it'll interrupt her because she's left too long of a space between things that she said. So I
Yeah.
guess that's a little bit of a thing to learn as well.
That's a huge frustration for everyone. Everyone would be like, I know when I'm dictating sometimes or asking a command, I'll be like, that's not what I said. It gets it wrong. Or even for someone who hasn't
Yeah.
had an injury, but it's trying to teach them to, to at least try it. But sometimes if it's not going to work if that's not an easy thing and you can't do it by voice, then you can always use your phone and you can type out like that person with the example with the grocery list,
Mhm.
that person could open up the list on their phone and enter it manually without having to say it as well, and it would still show up in the same area.
And talk to their phone if they need
And
to.
exactly. So there's multiple ways of doing that, but it can be a big frustration. That's for sure.
Is that the most common daily struggle? What are the most common daily struggles that you encounter?
I would say memory and organization, they're major struggles. Things, missed appointments, difficulty following routines, repeated questions like managing medication. That's always a big issue. They don't resolve quickly, so the caregivers often feel like they're a constant state of monitoring and reminding people. So using technology can really help in this area. Getting a calendar or reminders to do system in place that suits the person, I find is key. I usually like introduce an app that includes their schedule, reminders, all in one location. So they're only looking at one app because you're on your phone. If you have a schedule and you have reminders, there's two different apps and you don't want to be going back and forth. So try to make it simple as possible. Have one app for everything if you can, but very simple. But because if it's too complicated for them to enter their appointments or reminders, you can also get, as I mentioned earlier, a caregiver can have their phone linked as well. So they can enter the appointments for them or reminders and it'll show up. So if they put it in their phone, it'll show up on their survivor's phone. So there's things like that. So just usually I stick with an app that's already pre-installed on your phone to make it a little easier. There's a lot of third-party ones, but I find the apps that they do provide you are the best place to start at first.
And have they come a long way?
They're always changing. Sometimes that's good and bad because I'll get somebody used to using, say, a calendar program and they're used to practicing this is how you add the appointments. And all of a sudden, Apple will do an update and now the interface looks completely different. The button's somewhere else. And now they have to kind of start again. So that can be a little frustrating. But most of the times when they do make a change, it is an improvement. So before they used to have with the calendar and to-dos, it was separate. Then Apple did another update several months back, and now they joined it. So now in the calendar, you can see your to-dos as well. And so that was an improvement. But the technology keeps getting better and better. Even the voice dictation stuff is at recognizing you a lot more better now than it did years ago. That's for sure.
And do you find that so if a caregiver or a survivor is frustrated with the tech, do you then step in to help them with the learning curve or perhaps suggest a different app or a different avenue?
I find let's stick with one, try to stick with it as long as you can. A lot of times it just takes a little bit of tweaking and then you can make the change. But when you need to,
So,
then
so you're reframing, right, for them. They think, oh, this isn't the right tool. This isn't going to work. And you're saying, well, you're just not used to it yet. Give it some time. This is what you need to do.
sometimes just making a little slight change in the settings for it to more customized for the client will make a big change.
Now, besides actual apps on phones, is there some other type of assistive technology that you're particularly fond of that you find makes a big change?
For many families, just like simple memory organization supports have the biggest impact. And they're clearly and consistent. I find that they help reduce appointments, repeatedly having to ask questions and daily frustrations for everyone. You could have visual supports also make a big difference. So having a photo-based instructions, it would like say step-by-step notes or labeled icons to help people complete tasks more independently without relying on verbal reminders. I do that with a lot of people. I give them a binder with step-by-step pictures. Say these are directions. Step one is this, and they can see a picture of what it looks like with those kind of prompts. And then having environmental supports, like I mentioned before, like having a smart speakers like a Google Home, Alexa, and just or like a simplified phone screens or voice activator reminders can be a game changer because they can remove the extra steps and reduce sensory and cognitive demands. I find what matters most isn't how advanced technology is, but how well it's matched to the person's ability and needs, and done well. It improves their independence, reduces the caregiver stress at the same time.
And when you bring in these changes, how long is there a huge range in how long it takes them to really get used to them, to adapt them, to make them part of their lives?
Some people really struggle with using it, and it's going to take a lot of time. Other people are like, they're like a sponge and they want more and they gravitate it to it quickly. But I really try to, I think just keeping it simple and then having the visual steps, I find is key because then they're not getting frustrated. They can follow these visual directions and just feel like they're more in control and not having that loved one having to constantly prompt them to do different things.
I like how when a lot of people think of tech, they think of just high tech, but the fact that you've taken some tech and you've made something that's relatively low tech, which is a binder, that's pretty simple, so that you're making it a lot less scary and a lot more accessible to people who aren't necessarily on their phones all the time or can't be on their phones all the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
Simple sometimes is a lot better. It doesn't have to be complicated. So,
Now, one of the things that occurred to me, and when I prepare for podcasts and I have to come up with questions or I have to do some research, people are very wary of AI, artificial intelligence coming in and taking over jobs and becoming a bad thing in their lives. But one of the things that I found is that yes, it can take over certain things and that should be better left to humans, but a lot of the times it takes over the drudgery or it can reduce the stress. Have you found that you can make use of AI to perhaps make the lives of survivors and their caregivers better?
oh, AI has become my best friend now. So it's amazing and it's improving all the time. I have a lot of clients help. They used AI. It's built into everything now too. The biggest thing I find where a lot of my clients find it helpful is more, say they receive an email. There's different programs that come in and it'll help. They get a long email from a lawyer. AI can then summarize the main points from it and really just reduce all that noise. And they're like, what do I have to do? And you can actually, it'll summarize and show exactly if there's anything that they need to follow up. And
And suggest how to respond to it.
exactly, just I use it all the time to help compose. I'm holding a staff meeting and or doing this event. Can compose an email for me, and it just does everything for you. It's so
Yeah.
smart. So
Whether you have a brain injury or not, it can certainly help if it's used in the right way. And when I think about the words artificial intelligence, if your intelligence has been affected by a brain injury, if your cognitive fatigue has been raised or your ability to focus and you get fog, artificial intelligence can step in there like a physical crutch and help you out in dealing with a lot of these things. So that's really amazing. I noticed on your website that it mentions live scribe training. Tell me about that. What is that?
Oh, live scribes training. I find that's a little bit of older technology. I used to do that quite a bit. Client would, a lot of students who used to use it, they would use if you're not familiar with it, it was a pen they would write. They had special notepads and you would write your notes. It would also record audio. Later on, then it would send those notes to the live scribe program and you could then see your handwritten notes and some of the audio recordings. So I find that AI has actually replaced this kind of technology. You don't have to have that physical pen anymore. Instead of using it, that's very time consuming as well, like writing things out and trying to pay attention to your professor or things like that. So you're missing a lot of information, or even just during team meetings or somebody's there for a caregiver or the client or even myself. So what I tend to use is programs like apps and programs that will record the lecture. I use a program called Evernote. It has it built right in there.
Yeah.
What I do is when I start a program, I have my students use this as well. They just open up the app, they hit record. So what it does is it's recording the lecture.
Hmm.
Afterwards, it takes that recording, automatically transcribes it all. So it types out everything that was said and puts it in the program. So you can go back later and see everything that was said. You can listen to the recording as well. Then you can use AI as well and say, can you summarize this for me? So instead of listening to this long lecture or team meeting, you can get the main points from using it. It's just a lot easier than using a pen and writing things out.
And I also noticed there's GPS and location tools. Is that when I see that, I think Google Navigator, I think Apple, whatever Apple's map thing. I'm an Android user. Is that what you're talking about? Do you teach people how to use that, or is there something I'm missing here?
Yeah, it's more of a safety thing with it. Instead of the GPS knowing how to get directions, it's more of there's a geofencing alerts kind of thing. So say it would notify a caregiver a person leaves a designated area. It provides safety without that constant supervision. It can do like location check. And so somebody's wearing a phone or smartwatch, allows a person to independently to go places and the caregiver can then track them. There's reminders tied to location as well. So say you are out in the community, you can ask your phone, say, remind me when I get home to take my medication. So when you get home, it uses that GPS and it knows you arrived at home and an alert will pop up saying, take your medication. Or even if you've gone to a certain store, like I've done it before, where I need to go to Canadian Tire next time I went there to pick something up. I can say, next time I'm at Canadian Tire, remind me to pick up washer fluid. It'll do that. It'll detect when I'm near Canadian Tire, and then that reminder will come up on the screen. I do have some examples of when I used it with the client and how it really made the caregiver feel a lot safer. So I had a client who didn't want to use an Apple Watch or a phone. So when they
Hmm.
go into the community, so what they used was the AirTags, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they put it on, so it's a little tracking device. They put it on a lanyard on their neck and they would leave their apartment and then their caregiver could then track and see where they are because they would never have a phone or watch on them. So that was kind of a safety thing when they're in the community. And then there's another quick one where I had a client who wore a smartwatch and they used the GPS function on it. He used to go for a walk in the woods. One day he was walking, had a fall. He was by himself. The watch detected the fall and it alerted his caregiver of his location using the GPS, and they were able to send for help.
Oh,
So a lot of that, I'm really a big fan of using the GPS and all those kind of features.
and it's that accurate, and it can actually detect a fall, I guess,
It has
because
to be a hard fall, so you don't get these false
okay.
springs. But he did have a hard fall. If there was even a car accident there, it would detect that motion and let somebody know. So it's pretty good technology. I'll just say that's the biggest concern with caregivers, their loved ones going out in the community and just knowing where they are. Because some people, they even wander off without telling
Absolutely.
anyone. So being able to track their location and still giving that person their independence and is key.
And do you find that the type of technology that's adopted or that you recommend changes depending on who the survivor is, whether they're younger, they're older, depending on their type of injury?
Definitely because somebody who is younger thinks it's kind of cool, the technology. And a lot of times they already have it anyway. They have a phone, they have things like that. So they're
Yeah.
going to be more apt to use it. But I find an older generation that they're like, I'm not going to wear the smartwatch. I'm not going to, they're a little more resistant sometime, but it's just
Or if they have the smartwatch, they may not remember to recharge it
oh, definitely. And that's a
or
huge,
bother recharging it or remember how to use it or whatever else.
everybody's so different. It's so unique. You really have to meet with somebody, get to know talk to a caregiver and say, what are the challenges? What are these barriers? What's going on? And then try to customize it to that person, what kind of technology or device or program, because everybody's so different. what works with somebody is not going to work with somebody else all the time.
So that's where you start. You would have a conversation with both the caregiver and the survivor and say, what are your challenges? And then you think of whatever technology has will cover that the best or range of them. And they decide. And once they've decided, do you then train them or do you help? Or how does that work?
So usually I try to stick with what they have. If you already have a phone, let's not try to have another expensive buying another device. And so try to use what they have and what we can do with that, meet with them and have them practice whatever programs I think might help. In a lot of cases, though, they might not have the right program. I might, it all depends on their limitations, especially if there's physical limitations. A lot of times I'll have to introduce some switches that where they would press, maybe they have to use their elbow to press a button and it controls their phone. But through those kind of motions, even there's a head tracker where I had a client that puts a little dot on tracking it like a mouse on their glasses. And with
Right.
head movements, they're controlling the mouse on their computer. They're then able to send emails and with a combination of different programs. And so it all depends on someone's level of impairments. And it's so unique. But it's not just all about using what you have, but I usually try to do that before we have to start buying some of these more expensive assistive devices. Because as you so much out there, it can get overwhelming if you look and you're like, well, what's the good for me?
And is it a challenge for you to stay on top of all this tech that must change week by week, month by month?
It is. It's fascinating, and I learn a lot from people. I think I can get pride myself on knowing what I with technology, but then I'll talk to someone and they're like, "Did you hear about this?" I'm like, "No." And then I learn so much. Even with clients, sometimes they'll tell me, "Oh, I've been doing this. I had no idea it did that. What a great idea!" And so just trying, and technology just changes all the time. I remember doing a presentation once, and then I think it was just the day before, there was all new changes, and then I had to revamp everything. It was all because the technology completely changed in that area. It's always evolving, which is amazing. It's good. I think,
So would you say, is there a particular area it's changed the most, where you've seen a lot of real improvement?
I would just say with the AI stuff, how
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, that is the biggest thing. Everybody talks about it now, and it just makes everyone, a caregiver, a client, even a professional like the OTs and stuff, it makes their life so much easier. Yeah.
Now, you're not necessarily with the client as often as an OT or an RSW or registered support worker, rehab support worker. Do you work with them because they are there to put out the fires and calm down the person who is having trouble with the tech?
So I will likely see them once a week initially, and then that would slow down, and I become more of a troubleshooting person as things come on. But then I create a program with different apps and programs, and I would have the rehab support worker or the OT or family members. They'll be the one practicing with them because they're going to see them on a day-to-day basis. So I want to give them the tools that they need. And like I said, a lot of the times it's those scripts that they can follow, makes it just so much easier. I'm a big pusher of that because I just find those visual steps are key. And then making the small changes as they need because it's going to evolve all the time. What works
Right.
after a few weeks, it might be a little different now, and you got to make some changes.
So can they contact you at any time or during office hours or whatever and say, look, this isn't working. What do I do?
Oh, I'm always available. Everybody always, my clients that I see, they're always texting me, and I'll hear from people years later after I haven't seen them, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm now using this, and can you help me out?" Or this problem, something happened. There's always troubleshooting things, and I always make myself available to help.
You sometimes find yourself they're all excited about a technology and you say, well, wait a second, well, let's put the brakes on here. You probably don't need that one because sometimes people can get starry-eyed and say, oh, well, look at this tech. This is great. Do you find yourself saying, oh, don't spend that amount of money because tech can be expensive? How about this?
Oh, yeah, sure. They'll see, especially the parents, I find are the biggest one when they have kids who have had an injury. They'll be, which is great. They're Googling all kinds of different devices. They'll say, "Oh, I heard about that," but and this thing, it's so expensive. So you don't want people buying things and then they get it and it's not appropriate for their loved one. And so it's kind of like start out small. Let's test some things out. A lot of times I'll come in with certain devices and have the person test it out just to see if it's the right fit for them. And then if we need it, then we can order it. But it is unfortunately a lot of trial and error with people. But don't jump out, don't run out, buy so much stuff because a lot of times
And it sits around.
it's not going to get used. Exactly. I find just introduce one thing at a time. Don't try to fix every issue that you have. Okay, memory is the biggest thing. What is going to help with that now? Let's focus just on that because it's going to get overwhelming if you're having them use so many different devices or apps at one time. It's like master one thing first, and then let's move on to the next because it can just get overwhelming.
Particularly if you have a brain injury,
Oh,
because track of these things, you've learned it one day and the next day you go, I knew that yesterday. Well, we talked about memory and the challenges that survivors and caregivers face with that. How about some of the other challenges like fatigue, emotional regulation, sensory overload, that type of thing? Is there assistive tech that can help out with that?
I would say cognitive fatigue is one of the most misunderstood challenges for sure. Families are often surprised how quickly a person can become mentally exhausted and how dramatically that fatigue affects memory, attention, and behavior. A task that looks simple on the outside, it can completely drain someone with a brain injury. It needs them shutting down and getting very irritable. And then it's like emotional regulation is another area where the
Mhm.
commonly, underestimated. The changes in their mood, frustration tolerances, impulse controls. Reduced insight can be far more disruptive to their daily life and relationship problems. There are apps that can help with emotional regulation. For sure, there's like I would say self-guided breathing and meditation ones. I've used with clients in the past. There was Calm and Headspace. They're two apps. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but yeah, they
Those are
guide you.
subscription-based ones, if I remember right.
There's lots of different ones that are not as well, but I find they just seem to be very good with helping with that emotional
Yeah.
regulation kind of thing. And
And what I
even
liked
your
about Headspace is you get a little bit of a free trial to find out if it works for you and then
yeah,
decide after that.
even on your watch, you can have it set. If you're wearing a smartwatch, you can have it set to come up every so often and say time to breathe, and it'll guide you through some breathing exercises every so often. You can set your watch to do things like that. And then also, well, like sensory overload, that's also a big one, like the noise, the screens, busy environments. It's too much information can overwhelm the brain, especially early on. And I find for technology can control the environment. You can put like smart lights, noise canceling apps, voice activated assistants sometimes allow to adjust sensory input. So you can dim the lights, turn off notifications, or play calming sounds without the need for caregivers' interventions. So even putting simple screen filters or having the phone's interface screen like simplified can
Mhm.
reduce that information overload, and that'll help with fatigue.
I've noticed that the makers of these phones have really introduced a lot, even whether you have a brain injury or not, to bring down that eye fatigue, that screen fatigue. One of the things that I've talked to a brain injury survivor that actually uses the setting where it simplifies the number of buttons on it, just makes it, I think it's originally intended for children or people who just get confused easily, and they find that that's a lot more helpful. They don't have to scroll and try to find a particular app. The ones they use the most often are right there and they're nice and big and easy to get at.
That's very helpful. And just even someone with some physical impairments, if you can put less buttons for them to try to press, it just makes it easier. So it's just so customizable what you can do. I'm such a huge fan of the accessibility features and all of the devices because you can just make it so user friendly. And
And you talked about lighting. You probably don't go into the home, but you would check with OTs and say, are they someone that can benefit from change in lighting, a change in color of lighting, intensity of lighting, that type of thing? I've gone with the survivor into her condo and she'll say, Alexa, turn on kitchen lights and bring down the heat or whatever it is. Do you find that you work with OTs that way or do you go into the
uh,
home? How's that work?
no, I actually do go in the home, or my technology trainers do. I have a team of people depending on where the client is. So we'll go in and assess if this is something that they want,
Right.
and I will install the bulbs and set up the smart speakers that will control it, or if they can use their phone. I've even put in automatic door locks, so it's controlled, unlocking the door, changing the thermostat can be done as well. And so you can put all these smart devices in, and we can definitely help with the setup and installation of all that stuff. So I've done that quite often.
And when you introduce the technology, again, I talked about this earlier, people can get they can get frustrated. They come to you and they say, oh, this isn't working that time. Is there a point at where you say, oh, you have to make a decision versus it's the learning curve, or perhaps this isn't the right technology. We need to try something else. At what point do you make that decision?
That's a tough one because yeah, a lot of times it's a learning curve. And so you want to give it enough time and try to make the adjustments that you can. But at some point, you have to be like, oh, this is just not the right technology. And you need to make that change and try something else. But try to stick with it as long as you can. But if you notice that the client's getting very frustrated, and it's leading to that, then that's not what you want. It's there to help your client, help the caregiver. And if it's not helping, then that's the time we really need to reevaluate.
When we look at the cost of technology, you try to not to get them to overspend. Is there technology where it really is worth spending a little bit more money because you find that there's a really big bang for the buck?
But just making sure you're using up to date, like I've tablets and computers are kind of main
And
devices.
they've already spent the money in a lot
They've
of
already
cases.
spent it. Yeah, just the biggest frustration I find is that the technology gets dated pretty quickly. So you're using an iPhone, and then all of a sudden, a few years go by, and then the phone's really slow now. There's new programs that are not working. So if you're going to spend the money, when you start getting to that point where the devices are causing that frustration and they're slow now, money and getting a new phone because it has new features. It's not a not cause of frustration because it's working slow. It's something they're going to use every day that people have. So they're the main things. But it all depends on the person's impairments. If someone has a lot of physical injuries, you're going to have to spend a lot more on some technology that would help because you're going to want those. There's a lot more out there to help with that kind of stuff. So
We haven't talked too much about that. We've talked a lot about the memory. We've talked about fatigue, overstimulation, that type of thing. But I'm thinking, for example, of stroke survivors with impaired mobility. Is there particular technology that you found really helps with that? You talked about voice to text. That certainly avoids the thumbs on the screen type of thing. Is there anything else?
um, physical with stroke and everything, a lot of times because they have the physical limitations, you try to do a lot more voice activated things if
Right.
somebody can. A lot of I mentioned before, like stuff I've had press a switch and it would open the door to their house as well. They have things,
Actually physically open the door.
yeah, so that would have to get someone to things like that. But there are ways. I'm just thinking back to my clients who have been quite physically impaired when I've gone to their home and things we've done. Um, yeah.
Okay, and do you review with the clients over the years? Like you've said, you've have clients that talk to you that have you from years ago. Needs change sometimes. Sometimes they get better, sometimes other challenges appear. Do you check back with them, or do they check back with you and see what type of assistive technology is available? Or as technology gets better, do you go, okay, you recommended this to you 3 years ago, but look at what I found. Um, does
Yeah.
that happen?
Yeah, a little bit of both. A lot of clients, they reach out and they'll be giving me updates saying, "Oh, I love this." Or they'll say that now that they're having a little bit of problems with it, or when they say they love it, I might then think, "Oh, that's kind of old. There's this new stuff," and I'll say, "Why don't you give this a try?" If I think they can, and I'll say this might be a lot better option. But a lot of times I'll get a call and they'll say something in their life has changed. They're like, "Oh, I'm going back to work now. I'm going back to school." And now they're looking for that kind of support. What can I do now? You showed me how to like introduce this program before. How can I now use it in my work environment instead of just my personal life? Or how can I use it for school? And so just trying to give them more suggestions on how to keep using what they have. Sometimes introducing something new altogether. But yeah, I just want to let them know that they're not alone when I disappear, and I'm always there for that trouble.
You haven't completely
I
disappeared.
haven't left because things come up with technology all the time. Even just, yeah, like all my phones, little small things with their phones that are acting up. My phone keeps freezing now. What can I restart it like to factory settings or something? The little things that always come up. So
Yeah, and that can be quite challenging. To find that, I imagine that because somebody has to pay for this, and in some cases it is the insurance company. Do you find yourself dealing with insurance companies or knowing what they will approve, what they won't approve, what's worked before, that type of thing?
yeah, they're the biggest challenge because they want to keep the costs down. A lot of times when I go in, I'll try to get the insurance company just to allow me to go in and to at least meet with the client and do that initial kind of assessment to say this is what will help. And I can give people a lot of stuff right from the start. Then I find it's easier to do that. And then if I can then go to the insurance company, if I realize after I have that initial meeting, and I could say, you know what, they have an old phone. It's just causing
Right.
so much frustrations. I can then go to the insurance company and I can justify it and say, I've met with them. I've seen the frustration. They have this particular phone, and I can give it some concrete facts about showing how it's not how getting a new phone would help them. So if I can have some justification behind it, then so usually ask for to go in to see them first and then ask for devices. Because if you ask for everything at once, the insurance company would be like, oh, well, why are you asking for this? You don't even know if they need it. And so I think getting to know the person first better and trying to use what they have initially is the best way to keep the cost down and more likely to get the insurance company to pay for to pay
Yeah,
for.
to not buy technology that sits unused anyway. I mean, if the insurance company said yes and you're buying some gizmo that isn't helpful, that does is frustrate the survivor.
And you're wasting your rehab dollars on, you only goes a
Yeah, they're
certain
limited
amount, right? You
depending.
don't want
Yeah,
to waste it on things that you're not going to use because it can get pricey for technology. So.
absolutely. Now, you have people contacting you time. Have you ever had some really good success stories where it's restored their dignity, where it's really made their lives better? Can you think of a few examples?
Yeah, I think every single client has said that it's made such a huge impact. Every rare client where technology, we started working with them and basically they felt like it was forced on them and they weren't really onto it, receptive to it. But most people, once they learn a little bit, then they're like a sponge and they want to learn more. And at first you thought they wouldn't want to. A lot of some people where they've returned to work and they found it at first when I got involved, they were struggling to stay organized and they felt like, oh, I might end up losing my job. I can't do this. And then going in and showing them some programs to help keep them organized and structured at work. Then I hear from them later on, and they're like, "I've been using those tools, and now my progress at work is so much better. I'm doing so much more, um, my fatigue better because I'm using these programs, and then I'm just more organized and getting work done." And so I can definitely think of that. Or someone in school who's graduated, they struggled the whole time, and then they followed a
Mm.
lot of these things, and then you hear from them, and they're like, "Oh, I just graduated," and yeah, it's to
Yeah,
see
that
the
must feel good.
success. Yeah.
Yeah, to help them out that way. That's amazing. Um, Probably the people around them that don't have brain injuries that are going, wow, what a great
Oh,
program. This, because that's what I find is I see a lot of this assistive tech and I go, okay, I don't have a brain injury, but boy, oh boy, this stuff's good. This certainly helps. I don't know, maybe just getting older is my brain injury, but
yeah. I always tell my clients, I'm like, everything I'm showing you, I use. So my day-to-day stuff, that's how I keep organized. I can't rely on these systems. And it's become so normal now. Like in school, so when I used to work with them years ago, if I was going to give them an iPad to use in class, it would be like, oh, I'm going to get singled out. Somebody's going to notice that I
yeah.
have this device. I don't want to use it. Now all students have a computer or an iPad or something. So now using the assistive technology when they're in that environment, it's so normal. They're not intimidated and they want to use it now. So
People are becoming more tech phobic. I'm a boomer. And in our day, if you were into tech, there were very few people that were really into it. You had the tech guy that you went to, and really most people didn't interact with it on a day-to-day basis. Now you have people that are born in the age of the internet and high tech, and to them, it's as easy as the phone was to us. It's amazing that this technology is advancing so rapidly. If you had to make a prediction, and I know I didn't include this in the questions I sent to you. Where do you see it going? Where do you see assistive tech going for people with brain injuries?
wow. Yeah. Oh, that's a tough one because it's only going to just keep improving all the time. It's amazing. And we talked about AI, and I think that's just the key that everybody keeps talking about right now. And I just because of brain injury, you have all these issues, and the AI is just that perfect tool to help. And I just think there's going to be more integrate. It's going to be integrated more into everything that we use.
Seamlessly. So you're not actually going to have to talk to it. It'll just be there.
Yeah, and it's just going to make life so much easier. You already see it happening on everything. It's now like just in the last few months it's already in my like mail the mail program on a Mac. It now has it integrated automatically in there. Now I used to have to install third party mail. Now it's just in there.
Oh
it,
yeah, and Google puts the Gemini in, and it takes care of your email. I'm not the
yeah,
option, again, afraid of sharing with Google, but it will summarize emails. It'll alert you
yeah,
to an email that's important, suggest getting rid of certain emails that are not important, that make the lives of all of us a little bit easier, but particularly people who don't want to wade through emails
yeah.
getting from whatever source. So
You
that,
notice that almost
yeah.
all your programs, you're going to start. I've already seen it all the time. Like every app you have, they'll say now includes AI. Like now, like almost every update
Whether
you
you
do,
want it or not, here it is.
it's part of the features now. Yeah, I think that's a good thing because I'm like it's things that people are a little bit weary about because for data and privacy stuff.
Oh,
I know
absolutely.
that's a
Yeah.
but um, yeah.
Do you have to warn people about that and sharing data and give them the implications of using? certain
Most
types of
people are
tech.
not worried about it, but I find a lot of the older people I know, I do hear that they're like they think the government's spying on them. I hear that quite a bit, and their data is being stored. But I think what you look at is where's it being stored and how secure. Like big corporations like Google and stuff, like they can really have a lot of data breaches and things like that. I think you need to look at how you're sharing as well, and what personal information. And I guess there is always a risk. I personally am not worried about it, but I just definitely validate if somebody feels that way and make sure that they know that um,
Do is give them the facts and
exactly.
what is actually true versus what they may hear on media
Yeah.
to catastrophize things. There are concerns, but you don't need to
Yeah. Because when you do a
overreact.
search, a lot of times when you do a search on, you ever do that, you look something up, and the next thing you know,
You get
Facebook
an
and
ad
every
for it.
ad is about
Yeah.
what you were looking up. So there is some, overlap there. And so,
Well, the things I was going to ask you to do include with this podcast, send me as visuals a list of some of the technology that we've talked about with some visuals to that. So hopefully we'll be able to include that with this video. And we're going to have to update it. I'm going to have to talk to you again. I know this because tech being what it is, I'm sure that you're going to encounter something by this time next year that you're going to go, hey, Remy, look at this. This is going to make better. And I've been using this with my clients. Definitely talk to you again. Uh,
no, that'd be great. And I will send you
Great.
everything that I think would be helpful for your caregivers and your clients, things that my experience over the years. I'll send you all the kind of things that we didn't even talk about today, so that way they can kind of go for yourself and see if you.
Absolutely. We'll talk again, and people like to see, point to down here that'll be here. We'll definitely ask you about some of the things we didn't get to today, and I really appreciate your time, and appreciate what you're doing for survivors and caregivers to make our lives a little bit easier. So again, thanks for talking to me, Rick, and we will talk again soon. All right?
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Okay.